Just like to share with everybody a fascinating thought that we can bring with us to the Seder. And this is something which has interested me. One of my favorite stories in Chumash is the story of Yosef. And I think it's very intriguing to see that Yosef seems to be the unexpected guest at the Seder. What do we mean by that? There seem to be many references to Yosef, almost seeded into the story. For example, one of the reasons why we do karpas is we dip. And we think about it, where's the first time that we dip something, or something is dipped in the Torah? The first time we see dipping is the dipping of Yosef's coat. In fact, our sages say that it could be the reason we dip the karpas, we dip the potato or the celery into salt water, is to remember the dipping of Yosef's coat. The brothers took his coat after they threw him into a pit, and they dipped it in blood. We begin the Seder by dipping potato, dipping celery, dipping karpas. In fact, one of the names of Yosef's coat is called karpas. And we dip it to symbolize that where did the liberation really begin? Where did redemption really emerge? It really emerged with Yosef. Yosef was the reason why we came down to Mitzrayim. The fact that the brothers sold him. The fact he was thrown into a pit. The fact that his coat was dipped into blood. We begin the Seder with a memory of how it all began. But it's interesting, that's a memory of slavery. And karpas is a symbol of freedom, dipping. Why during our symbol of freedom do we go back to Yosef, which is slavery? Secondly, why do we drink 4 cups of wine? So we're all familiar with the different words for liberation, l'chakti alti, hotsesi, those different words of liberation. However, our sages give another reason, a very fascinating reason. They say the reason we drink 4 kosos, 4 cups of wine, is because kos, cup, is mentioned 4 times in the story where Yosef interprets the dream of the sarmashka, of the butler. We know that he had a dream and he came to Yosef. And in that dialogue, he told about cups of wine. And there were 4. So our sages say we drink 4 cups of wine. Why? To remember that Yosef, when he was in prison, he interpreted a dream of 4 cups. Interesting. Cups of wine are all about freedom. We know that. If there's any statement of freedom at the Seder, it's the wine. It should be a rich wine. It should be a red wine. It should be an expensive wine, something which gives us simcha and joy. Only rich people, only free people drink wine. Yet, according to this statement of our sages, which is very interesting, it's remembering an event that happened during the slavery of Yosef. The 4 cups that he listened to and interpreted when he was listening to the dream of the butler. And finally, it's interesting that we have 3 matzot. First matzah represents the mitzvah of lechem mishnah, that we have to eat bread, lechem, matzah in this case. The second one we know has to do with a chilat matzah, special mitzvah on the night of the Seder, to eat matzah. And there's a question, do we eat them together? And that's why we eat 2 ksesim, if we're familiar with that. But the question I want to look at is there's a third matzah there. It's the matzah that's underneath it all. What's that third matzah doing? And again, amongst the different reasons, one is offered that says it represents a korban todah. Korban todah is the korban which was brought, specifically, our sages say, when a person is liberated. And specifically liberated from what? Liberated from prison. Who was liberated from prison in the Torah? Yosef. Yosef seems to be the missing character at the Seder. Not mentioned, yet alluded to. Alluded to in the karpas, his coat being dipped. Alluded to in the 4 cups. Wine alluded to with the matzah, a korban todah, the korban that we bring when we're liberated from prison. What's he doing? Why Yosef? Why is he there? But why is he there so subtly? Why is he there in such a hidden way? Perhaps we might suggest the following answer. The Seder is a night of jumping. It's a night of total freedom. A night where we go from slavery to the ultimate in exaltation of liberty, liberation, in one quick bound. It's a night of jumping. In fact, the word Pesach means Pesachti, means to jump. How interesting it is that the same three letters which mean jump, also contain the hidden word Pesach, which means peh. Letter peh means mouth, sak speaks. The mouth speaks. The two types of jumping that you can do. You can jump physically, or you can jump spiritually. Well, jumping physically, we know how to jump physically. But how do we jump spiritually? We jump with our mouth. We jump when we speak. We jump when we focus on how much we owe Hashem and what He did for us and what He does for us. And the miracles that He brought in order to take us out of Egypt. We jump spiritually when we use our mouth. It's a night of jumping. It's a night of exaltation, and we can jump and reach levels unimaginable at the night of Seder. Our sages tell us. But it's very interesting. If we think about it, where did this liberation really begin? It really began in darkness. It began in a place where we didn't know it was coming. With whom? With Yosef. And when we look back at Yosef, we have the benefit of looking at the end of the story and seeing that, Yosef's travails and difficulties led to such a glorious end for him. But he didn't know that as he was going through it. From his point of view, he was in a pit, being sold by his brothers into slavery, his coat being dipped into blood. He gets incarcerated unjustly, imprisoned for many years. Why? For the crime of refusing immorality. And there he is in prison, not knowing where it's going to end. And he hears about 4 cups of wine. And finally he's liberated. And that's the Korban Todah. Yosef's life is a life where, as he's experiencing each event, it's dark. He doesn't know how it's going to end. It's only when we look at the end of the story do we realize it was all for such a glorious purpose. Perhaps the hidden lesson of the Seder that we have to take with us, as we're being liberated, as we're seeing the light, as we're seeing the conclusion of the slavery, as we're reliving the plagues, as we're reliving Hashem's involvement in taking us out, we have to remember that even at the time when there was darkness, when Yosef was in a pit, when Yosef was in prison, that's where the redemption was really being born. And how important it is in our own lives to understand we don't see the end right now. And there might be darkness, and there might be difficulties. But we have to realize that just like Yosef, who couldn't see the outcome, but the outcome was so glorious. And the Seder is speaking to the point where we're taken out. But even as you're being taken out, remember how it all began. It began with Yosef. It began in darkness. It began in a pit. It began in a prison. But those points were just as much a part of the redemptive process of liberation as the ultimate liberation would be. Let us learn that lesson. Let's take it home at the Seder. Let's understand that whatever's happening in life is all part of a much greater purpose, part of a redemptive process. One day we will see that process. We'll see the glorious end, and we'll understand why everything that happened to us in our lives, to us as a nation, is all part of such a beautiful future. Wishing everybody a Chag Sameach. I wish you a beautiful Seder.